Hello, everyone. Oh, actually, straight away, side by side. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the launch of Please Don't Read the Footnotes, Please, which is our brand new children's book by Rob Walton. And I'm very excited to hear Rob read from it today. I'm going to be asking him some questions. You're very welcome to ask him some questions too. You can put them in the Q&A box. And we'll be talking a bit about how the book came about. So it'll be a lovely celebratory evening, and yeah, I'm really excited about it, and I'm very, very pleased that you're joining us too. So the way it's going to work, yeah, so we'll talk about the origins of the book. Rob will read a couple of stories, or maybe a few stories, then we'll have the Q&A, then we'll have your questions, or perhaps I'll weave them in together, and then Rob will read a bit more, and that will be the end. Okay, so I'll start off by saying a bit about the book. Well, we've known Rob for a bit of a while, because Rob was actually in our, well, I think first you were in our Space and Aliens anthology, or were you Slow Things?
Yeah.
Slow Things first. And yeah, so Rob's been in a few of our poetry anthologies. And I'm remembering your poem in our Aunts anthology, which is a really lovely one. I didn't know about the bits in the bottom of the chip.
Oh right, yeah. I particularly like the Aunts anthology, actually, for all sorts of reasons.
Yes, and yeah. So, and then I have a very strong memory of Rob coming to our Space and Aliens children's poetry anthology launch. And you had a shirt which children in your class, and actually I can share a picture of it because I've been going,
Excellent.
for various reasons I've been going through trying to find kind of Emma Press photos. So
oh wow,
at the Space Aliens, and yes, with a customized couture shirt.
I'd forgotten all about that. It was a school, a friend of mine in London. It was, in fact, I went there beforehand, and it was the children in that class. I'd completely forgotten about that. Although I still think I do have the shirt somewhere. I should have worn it tonight, shouldn't I? Missed a trick.
But yeah, so that was a lovely event, and I think that was again, a lot of events have blurred into one. I'm going to say, is that the first time we met? But I'm not actually sure. Perhaps we met another time too.
Think so, yeah. Then we met in Birmingham at I think the launch for that. In fact, I think if I remember rightly, I think there was an event for that, and I think you and Rachel were doing an event upstairs. Were we in Waterstones, maybe?
Yeah.
I think that's what happened.
Oh, so kind of the relationship with Rob goes way back, and it was well, basically Rob's invented a genre, we think. So I was delighted and surprised when I heard that this was on our shortlist, and I was really excited to read it because I thought, oh, I obviously really like Rob's writing, and yes, know that you can write for children, but this sort of this kind of we've tried calling it flash fiction, but is it short stories for children? Is it something else? Because it's both short stories but with something extra with the footnotes. And yeah, so when I was reading the manuscripts, which was sort of immediately very compelling. It was delightful. It was such a thrill, because I'm always so happy when kind of writers whose work I've been following, kind of send in something. I think, yes, this has got something. And I think, I can't remember how long the original manuscripts was, but they can't have been that long. Those things we asked for them 10 pages or so. So
yeah, I think there were possibly about 8 stories, maybe something along those lines.
Yeah. So I remember, you couldn't, like, we needed to see more, and then when you sent in everything, then I could really picture it. And it's always, again, it's such a roller coaster working with submissions, because you read the sample, and some of the people do send in the whole thing straight away, but often it is just the sample, and then you're waiting to see what the full thing is, and you've described it, but then you think, does it deliver? And it totally delivered. It was it was such a sort of, well, a triumph for you, Rob, and it made me very happy that we could publish this, because yeah, it was such a good fit for the Emma Press, partly because it's kind of, it feels very sparky and new, and that's kind of what we want to do with our burgeoning children's list. And it's very funny. I always want to publish genuinely funny books, and also we've gotten some great reviews. I want to, before I forget, name check everyone involved. There's Georgia Wall, who's watching, our amazing publishing manager, James Trevelyan, the director of the Emma Press, who's just been pushing everything, and Perry, a wonderful publishing assistant, and then also Catherine Ward, who's been doing a PR campaign for the book, and has got some really great coverage, some great reviews, and a couple of them have been name checking Terry Pratchett, which I wouldn't. I mean, could I say it? I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I mean, other people have said it. They've compared Rob to Terry Pratchett. Incredible. And you'll see what we mean when Rob starts reading. So that's kind of, well, that's the backstory of the book from my perspective, and I'll be asking Rob to tell us a bit more. And the final person to mention, who I sort of didn't even, I realised I should have got to put her name on the cover, but the book is also illustrated by Rena McWarner, who's one of the illustrators we work with very frequently, because we love her work, and it really fits in again well with the feel of the Emma Press. So you can see sort of scattered throughout, just kind of little vignettes that really capture the sort of the slight anarchy and playfulness of the stories. So that's my introduction. Rob, would you like to tell us more?
Great, thank you very much. Well, I mean, I would like to echo those thanks, really, in the first place. I would obviously like to thank you, and I would like to thank James and Georgia and Perry and Catherine and Rena for the loveliness of the cover and the loveliness of the illustrations. In one of the answers to the questions later on, I'll talk about more about my journey with the press and so on. And now, are you okay if I go into a story now then, Emma? Yeah. So I'm gonna start. There are 30 stories in it. I think when I sent the original sample, there were 8 or 10, and when I sent the final manuscript, I think maybe about 40, because we lost some along the way. But one that we retained, which I'm going to read now, is called Unreliable Narrator. Now, it's called Please Don't Read the Footnotes, please, because it has footnotes. When I'm reading it out, I mentioned this in an email to Emma, it's quite interesting for me to work out how I'm going to actually do the footnotes. If you're reading it to yourself, that's a very different thing. So I point them out in different ways. The first one I'm going to do here, Unreliable Narrator, is an easy one because there's only one footnote, and that's after the title. So I can manage that one without too much hassle. So, Unreliable Narrator, and I'm going straight to the footnote. Frankly, I wouldn't trust any of the narrators in this book, but I suppose they're a bit better than the so-called author, and he, in turn, is better than the publishers, and they, in turn, are better than the printers, and they, in turn, are way better than the narrators. I'll leave you to make up your own mind about the readers, but I'm obviously not convinced. And now to the story. A long time ago, just this morning, Max and his dog went to see the Wicked Witch deep in the deepest, darkest forest. They'd received an email invitation in the post and were very excited. All the witches they'd met so far had been super lovely and jolly and had given all 4 of them exciting presents. Those witches never forgot a birthday. Max was purring when they got to the witch's bungalow on the new estate. They couldn't decide whether to knock on the door or ring the beautiful ornate bell, so they walked straight in. Max closed the door behind him and did the smallest of wheeze on the welcome mat. Max looked at his dog and shook his head. Fido, no! I've told you before about calling me Fido. My name's Fidel, and you do well to remember it if you want me to help you with your maths homework again. And Max apologised and went searching for the wizard, while the cat, who was in a big huff, jumped onto the nearest branch. 2 days later, the Max twins returned to the cottage with the recipe and the cauldron. They were pleased because the prince had written everything in his very best handwriting and given them a discount code for spiders and big stirring things. When the food was cold, they texted all of their uncles and shared the delicious feast in the beautiful midnight sunshine. The start. So that one is obviously, complete and utter nonsense. I mean, some of the stories have a little bit more sense or a little bit more of an explanation. The one I'm going to read now is a serious one because most of them are quite silly, I would say, but I do like to think that there is a heart in the book. And this is definitely a more serious one. I did think about reading at the end, but I will go back to a lighter one right at the end. This is a serious one. It's on page 46 if you're reading along. It's called Falling Star. I don't exactly want to go all serious on you, but sometimes that's the way it's got to be. This is a tiny tale about Parker and the time he caught a falling star and put it in my pocket where it burnt a hole. So he took it out and rested it in a broken terracotta plant pot in the middle of the backyard. He figured the soil and the clay wouldn't burn. He figured lots of things. He told his family and he told his friends, and they gathered round the broken plant pot. Without being told, they managed to form themselves into a circle so that everyone could see it shine, drink in its glow and feel its warmth. When they looked at it, they understood how it burnt and how it gave out light. With this warmth and light inside them, they found they could do everything that was needed to help them get through things. After a while, the warmth and the light from the star faded. There was a group of people in a circle, huddled over, staring at a broken plant pot. They straightened up and looked at the warmth and the light in themselves and told each other that they had to keep seeing it and feeling it. They had to. So there you go. That was a more serious one. There aren't very many serious ones in there, but there is definitely the odd serious note amongst the silliness.
Okay, I'll return. And just say you're such a good reader, Rob. You're very good at reading.
Thank you.
And yeah, and that reminds me, I think that's it's very funny. Yeah, you're right. There is a heart, and that was part of the challenge of getting the final selection of stories. I think I was steering it slightly towards the humor, but I really wanted to keep the heart as well, and just trying to get that right balance. I guess partly just thinking of the audience and children's book, and I thought, I guess that of course short story collections for children must exist, which are very serious, I'm sure, but I guess I always like it when there's a mix, and
Absolutely.
Because that's life, and I think I like that in our poetry books and now our children's prose books, we hope that there's things that stay with readers, that you could read, you remember when you're much older, and you think, oh, I remember that really stayed with me, that told me something, that taught me something, and it's still good because it's for everyone as well. Definitely. And I think there are lots of stories in this book, especially the Ms. Tang stories, which I think will resonate with readers, especially But yeah, so I'm going to get on with the questions now, because I'm very curious to find out the answers. Everyone watching in the audience, if you have things you want to ask Rob, so maybe about the stories already, or as we go along with the questions, if anything sparks anything, then do feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll pick them up and ask him. My first questions, Rob, is can you tell us about how the book started and how you prepared it for submitting to the Emma Press? So your side of things.
Great, thank you, Emma. And I will say, picking up on what you just said there, I was very aware of the press, and apart from my own sort of publication history with it, I've read various books for adults and children over the years, and I have some here. I've got loads of books dotted around me, so I've read all sorts of things that the Emma Press have done, and I know the sorts of things that the press is interested in, and I know that you and people in the press have got a sense of humour, so I was definitely aware of that when I submitted. So 2 years ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, is when I submitted the sample, basically. But I was looking through some stuff the other day, actually, and I found, I was sorting through some folders on the computer, and I found that Wazim's World of Worry, which is a story that did make it, was originally written on the 16th of January 2021. And Falling Star, which I've just read, was written shortly after that. So I'd written a couple of short stories or flash fictions for children, because I'd written lots of flash fictions for adults in the past. One of the big differences with the flash fictions here is that I wasn't worried about narrative arcs and some of the conventions that I would be perhaps obliged to when I was writing flash fictions for adults. I had much more freedom. So I saw the call out and I submitted some things. And then I was really excited and chuffed to find out that I'd been shortlisted or longlisted, whatever it was at the time. And then I had to get the full manuscript together. And what I did then was, because I was working as a part-time primary school teacher at the time, I had a long summer holiday, and I didn't do a great deal in the summer holiday. I was a bit slack with that. What I did was I got really stuck into it when I went back to school in the autumn. Obviously, I worked on the manuscript on the days when I wasn't in school. And when I was in school, what I would do is I would do a long day at school. Pete, the caretaker, would kick me out 5 to 6. I would come home, I would have my tea, and I would sit at the laptop and I would start writing until I fell asleep, mostly. And it's quite important for me to say that, because the big thing for me about this whole journey is the fact that I did actually properly work at it. I'd always written bits and bobs of things, and had some success, and things in anthologies and so on. But this was a different thing, and it took me a long time to realise that you've got to sit down on that chair and you've got to really, really work. So I worked and I typed until I fell asleep, and I'd look at things the following day, and obviously the things that I wrote just before I fell asleep were usually absolutely rubbish, a complete gibberish. But amongst it, there were lots of things that I was enjoying. And one thing that happened was that as we went along later on, the ones that weren't so good, I was expecting some email correspondence, but in fact, Emma got Georgia to FaceTime me, and Georgia would just hold up burning pieces of paper and laugh and shake her head, saying, basically, no, this is a terrible thing. How dare you? That obviously clearly didn't happen. The collaboration was really, really good all the way through, and I really, really did enjoy. There were stories that about 10, I think, maybe, that didn't make the cut. And there was lots of toing and froing between myself and Emma. And it was great. I came across them today. I was looking through my original file, and I could see, oh gosh, what a good call that was on Emma's part, that we didn't let that one go through. It didn't fit. It wasn't right. It might have been all right in some senses, but it wasn't right for this collection. One of the difficulties I had was because I was writing things and I was interrupting myself with other ideas, which is how all the footnotes came about. That was great, and it was fun, and I really enjoyed doing the writing of that. In the editing, it became a little bit more problematic because some of the stories referenced other stories. And if one of the ones that was referenced then went, it was like, oh, blimey, how does that make it all hang together? Do I need to change something there or change something there? But it was a really good, fun process. And the actual writing, I really, really enjoyed. And I think that shows in the finished product. And to go back a little bit, we already touched on my journey with the Emma Press. And I do want to say another thank you to Emma and Rachel. Rachel, who did the quote for the book, and was co-editing with Emma when I first started doing things like the slow press. And then very nicely, they put the poem from there in the free verse book. And then there was the Watch in the Skies, where I wore that shirt. There was the one with the ants. And then there was the collaborative one with the Verve Poetry Festival. Then there was an adults one. And then there was a later dinosaur one. And again, nice things happened from those things. Like the letters one in here was then on the National Poetry Day website, which was really nice. The one that was in there which was then in this from the Natural History Museum. So they've been so very encouraging and just so good for me in all sorts of ways as a writer. But to go back to the heart of the question, it started with those ideas, and then those ideas, each idea I had for a story generated more. As I wrote, I was having an idea for something else to say about that story, but it was also triggering something else that became another story. So at times it was almost like I was having to finish one story. Oh, I'm going to write this other one now because it's giving me another idea, which was great. I mean, I've never generally been short of ideas, but writing this in particular generated lots and lots, and that whole process was really good fun.
Oh, that's so interesting to hear. And I think that answers Vicky Gatehouse's question about your writing process. And it's very nice to hear that Yoma Press has been good to you. I think that's what
Absolutely.
we wanted, you know, especially with anthologies, we always hope that, you know, they were sort of small in their own way and we didn't have a huge amount of reach, but we hoped that they could be a springboard for other things. And I'm really glad that's
definitely how it worked for me.
So my next question, which also ties in with one in the chat, is can you tell us about some of the children's books or authors that inspired you as a writer or a reader?
This is I've been thinking about this a lot, and it is very interesting. So I would say goat keeping, this one about goats, and Diary of a Lollipop Lady. They were the big key influential ones. Those and Roy Gender's Mushroom Growing at Home. No, they weren't. They're just some weird books I happen to have lying around the house. Now, what is interesting about me when I was a child and reading stuff and the things I was given is that I don't have a great memory of reading loads of classic children's fiction. I used to go to the library with my mum. I mentioned Riddin's Library, I think, in acknowledgements in the book. And I used to go there in the boxes with the picture books and go through there. And I used to read the picture books, none of which I especially remember now, though. And I had a very clear image of sitting with my mum, reading, all that sort of stuff. But what I used to get given at Christmas and birthdays and stuff, I would get given books like these. These are books about explorers. And I would get given loads of annuals, all of which I still have. This one I got when I was 4, the Banana Splits annual, loads of these sorts of things. But the other thing which I found interesting was what I got a lot of was more factual stuff. This here is a binder for a publication called World of Wonder. And it was a weekly magazine. And I was getting this when I was like 7 years old. And it was full of factual stories, but also serializations of classics and things to make and do, all those sorts of things. I've got a couple of binders of that. So I was getting that. And also another part work I got, the New Junior Encyclopedia, 18 different things. I got all these things. And I think this is relevant because I was absorbing loads and loads of different things. And I think I'm interested in quite a lot of different things. And I think that helped me on the journey. I've got lots of stuff in my head about all manner of things. I did have some exposure to some of the more sort of classic literature back then, if you like. I remember at school having Emil and the Detectives read to me and The Silver Sword. Emil and the Detectives, still, I reread it recently, still one of my all-time favourite books. I got this for a particular reason. This is A Withers of Earthsea, and I only read it a couple of years ago. The reason I mentioned this is because when I was at school, we had a guy called H.E. Todd visit school. He wrote a series of books called the Bobby Brewster books. And I think I won a writing competition, and I won the Observer's Book of Manned Spaceflight and this book here. And H.E. Todd signed it for me. So he was going around school signing other people's books, which is quite an interesting thing to do. But that's what he did. I read lots of stuff to children when I was working as a teacher. Since I've left teaching, I've read way more children's literature. I always read in the class, and I always read children's poetry to the children I taught. But since I left teaching, I've read a lot more. And some sort of classics like this, massive all-time favourite of mine, very quickly. Betsy Buys the 18th Emergency. What a fantastic book. Really, really engaging. It's just so fun. And an ancient book I read, which I've had forever, Down with School. Again, I only read this very recently, but it's got footnotes. And you find that some footnotes have been around for quite a long time. Other stuff that I've been reading more recently, I've been reading loads of Catherine Rundell. Something I read a long time ago, not when I was a child, when I first went to college, started getting into poetry, was Adrian Mitchell. Friends bought this for me. And I was always a big fan of Adrian Mitchell for his humour and his seriousness and his everyday language, all those sorts of things. Another person who wouldn't seem an obvious influence in some ways was Kurt Vonnegut. One of the reasons Kurt Vonnegut was an influence is probably because of his attitude. There's a famous quote from Kurt Vonnegut, which is something along the lines of, we are here on earth to fart around and don't let anybody tell you any different. And I do agree with that to a certain point. So I always read, but I didn't necessarily read classic children's fiction. And I think a lot of the factual books I read did or have fed in to where I'm at now as a writer. Does that answer your question?
No, it's really interesting. Yeah, just interesting to hear how you've got to this place, and it's not necessarily from you weren't trying to create a book like you read as a child.
No, not at all. No.
Yeah. Because I was thinking the reason I really wanted to publish the book was that it reminded me of a particular feeling I had. I guess probably when I was sort of more like 10 upwards, when books started getting a bit more mischievous, I guess. I mean,
Right.
it's probably classically when read Roald Dahl and things, but just I remember reading like Mark Haddon with the Agent Z books, which are very, very funny, and then Hilary Mackay, and just, there's the point, when you're very small and you're reading, I read a lot of fairy stories when I was small, so, like they're just sort of serious, they're magical, but they're kind of serious. And then I started reading books where, either the main narrator was kind of very naughty, or the writer's voice was mischievous, and that seems sort of magical, just you think, oh, ha 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 ha. You hear your, I'd hear my parents downstairs laughing. They went, oh, I'm reading jokes too, and so it just really.
No, I lots that completely passed by. I mentioned going to a book club at school. I remember I've got one of the things I remember buying from the book club, the Armada book of funny cartoons. So maybe there were tangential things going on. I used to watch sitcoms as a kid. I think maybe that sort of thing may have played into it, and always having a sense of what was funny, always liking that. There's another very strange thing. Not when I was a kid. I pulled this off my shelf the other day. It's an album by a band called Swell Maps. And the reason I pulled that off the shelf, it's had a free single with it. And the free single has a track on it. And that track is called Doctor at Cake. The album has a track on it called Don't Throw Ashtrays at Me. And it's that sort of odd left field stuff, which I've always been drawn to in whatever sort of medium it was. But I didn't, as I said, read classic children's literature by any means when I was younger.
That's a very, very good answer. Very interesting. So now we're going to drill down into specifics. Can you tell us about how one of your stories came about?
I'll talk about a couple, if I may. One, Wazim's World of Worry, is a story where a child has a bath, and it mentions that they're eating biscuits, and there is some damp grit at the end of their bath, and they cannot work out how this damp grit got there until eventually they realise that it was from eating biscuits, and it was biscuit crumbs. And that came about, obviously enough. Every Saturday when I do a park run, I tend to post on Instagram and Facebook photo of the books I'm reading. I'm usually reading a few books at a time, and a picture of my coffee, or there might be some cake or biscuits in there. And it came about from me having a cup of tea in the bath with some digestive biscuits, the bath being over, the water running out, and me seeing all this damp brown grit in the bath and really not being able to work out where on earth it was come from, which is just idiocy. I mean, it was very obvious cause and effect, but I couldn't work it out at all. It took me quite a long time. So that just became the story. So, I'm going to write about that, about a child who gets worried because they can't work out where it's from. There's a story in the book called Sausage Mug, and that came about from me making some sausages, making some vegetarian sausages for my breakfast or something, saving some to have cold in a sandwich at some point, and I was putting them in the fridge. But to take up less fridge shelf space, I put them in a mug rather than on a plate or in a bowl. So I just stood the sausages up in a mug, put it in the fridge, and then I do that and think, and then my head just goes. So I get inspiration from very ordinary things that happen in my day-to-day life. I do a lot of what if, and I do a lot of extrapolation. So, so that person's done it, but what if they all did that? It's all those sorts of things. So there are stories about horses in the book. I've got absolutely no idea where they came from. I have no relationship with horses. I've never been on a horse in my life. Just something crashing into my head. Things like Museum of Trunk. It's based in a real museum in Newcastle, which is obviously, a place I visited a few times with school children and with my own children and by myself. So there's an obvious inspiration for that, thinking about how children on school trips might behave in museums, or might be forced to behave with their clipboards and having to find answers on little display cards in the cabinets. Sort of thing I would read, not necessarily the thing that children enjoy reading or should be doing in museums. So it's like looking at that sort of experience and letting the children have more fun, really allowing them within the confines of the story.
That's really interesting. And I should say, with the second story you were talking about, Sausage Mug, that's a really good example of how Rob does the humour, but also the hearts, because that's got a very sort of ending, or I think maybe especially would resonate with adult readers as well. And I'm fascinated to see what children think. But I've heard of some reactions from children already who love it, but I haven't been able to sort of interrogate them about specifically what did you like and what did you get from this story. But at some point I will. But yeah, that's a lovely one. So my next question is, how did your experience as a teacher inform your stories? I think I don't know if I'll ever be sufficiently separated from the idea of being at school, but it still seems very sort of, I don't know, subversive to me. You're a teacher and you wrote this.
Yeah, I mean, well, I taught for a long time. I taught for about 25 years, and I left. Last summer I left. I taught in the same primary school nearly all that time, across the age range, and I ended up last few years teaching part-time and writing more on those. Those are the days, and I always had quite a sort of conflict. Well, not always, but certainly for a lot of that time, I had quite a conflicted relationship with teaching, because there were things that I was asked to do which I didn't necessarily agree with, and there was a time when I was able to plough my own furrow, as it were, and do the things that I thought were best for the children, right for the children, without neglecting any of the other things that I had to do, but having my own emphasis. And I always try to have a playful atmosphere in the class. I mentioned already that I like to read poetry or read things and have a bit of fun and have a joke, regardless of what age group I was talking. And I found that increasingly difficult as time went on. I think schools have changed quite a lot. And I think in some ways, schools, or some schools, are more like businesses and have a different mindset, which I don't really think is appropriate. So I found myself not fitting in so well. But at the same time, there are obviously any amount of delights on a daily basis from working with children. When I left, I was working in year 1 with 5 and 6-year-olds, and the story, for example, can we have a story, where the children are interrupting and coming up with their completely off the wall ideas, or answering questions that are in their own head, or asking things about their home lives, or things that don't seem relevant at all. I've got loads of experience of that, and it's great. And it can be frustrating, obviously, but it's really, really good fun at the same time. And I love that. But also, tied in with those irrelevancies and those interruptions is the children's love of story. Because across the board, whenever I've been in a classroom and we've got to a story, the children who weren't listening in those other lessons, or found it hard to listen for all sorts of reasons in those other lessons, story time, they're there, they're just there. Whether it's a story from a book or a story I might have made up, a nonsensical story I might have made up, they would be, you could just tell from their faces and their level of attention how much they loved it. So it definitely had a bearing there. There's another thing I'd like to mention here, actually, which is on page 11 of the book. There's a story, is it on page 11? Yeah, there's a story in the book called Penny Chocolate. Penny Chocolate is about someone who's never been to a friend's house. And it's one of the stories which, in many ways, was me extrapolating from something, thinking about something that might have happened. And right at the end of the story, it says this, it's an actual dedication, which is in the story. It says, this story is dedicated to the parents of J.R. and C, who once invited a girl to a party. This is one of those rare serious bits, the end. Then there's a footnote there, which I will read. Crikey, I've managed to get another serious bit in here. If you know what a pan au chocolat is, and you know someone who doesn't, how about buying them one as a treat so they can discover it? It's probably best if you don't try to make your own, unless you're a French baker. If you are, thanks for reading this book. It's fair to say you weren't the target audience, but everyone is welcome here. But the dedication, which is a bit I want to talk about, that was a genuine thing. That was based on children I taught, and a particular child who'd never got invited to a party. She'd never got invited to a party, never got invited to anybody's house. And the children were mentioned by their initials. They were 3 children from the same family who I taught over a period of time. And then one year they did. One of them did. She did get invited to a party. It was such a warm thing, in the way that children and some parents can be really, really inclusive and loving and caring and watching out for each other, which isn't always the way. So there was, so my experience of teaching had those more serious parts to it as well, without a shadow of a doubt. There are obviously things like ekphrasis, which is, I remember when I was at school, we had a visit from the local art gallery. They brought paintings in. That's probably the origin of that one. There were lots of things that happened in school, which I didn't set out by any means to write a book with so many school stories, or that I thought would be particularly read in schools. As I kind of said before, I was just writing things that I was enjoying writing. It happened, obviously, because of those 25 years of teaching. That was in my head somewhere. So it did come out in quite a lot of the stories, although it was definitely not any sort of explicit intention.
I feel like you could tell. I feel like even if we didn't say that you had been a teacher, I think the way you write about classroom dynamics and just children in general, it feels so real and lived, and that's lovely. And I'd say I feel like, Rob, you sound like a teacher that we'd all wish that we'd had. You sound like you.
I think I might have been in some ways, but some other ways, who knows? I don't know. Yeah, I should have a line of children I've taught over the past 25 years come to give their take on that.
Okay, so this is my final question. So this is audience. This is your last chance to get your questions in for Rob. So my last question is, what writing are you working on at the moment? You're obviously doing a huge amount of work helping to promote the book and doing lots of events. But are you working on something new?
I'm the fact that I have loads of ideas, which is a thing that is very true, is both a blessing and a curse, or it has been over a period of time, because I have ideas and then I interrupt myself, as I did in the writing of this, with other ideas all the time. So I might have ideas for a collection of something. In fact, and I don't know if you remember this, Emma, a few years ago, I submitted a sample of adult flash fiction to the press, and I was shortlisted or longlisted, and then I didn't, and I was asked to submit the whole thing, and I didn't because of where I was at emotionally or in my life at that time. I didn't actually submit it. So I have enough stuff, for example, for a collection of flash fiction. I'm working on a collection of poetry, adult poetry on a particular theme with a poet friend of mine. It's a collaborative thing, and we're quite far down the line with that. I'm working on a collection of children's poetry because I've had children's poetry in all sorts of things over a number of years now, and I very much want to get a collection of children's poetry together. And on that, I'm just going to do an aside here, if I may. Some people I didn't thank before when I was thanking Rena and everybody at the press and Catherine and so on. I didn't thank the community of writers, because I know there are a few writers in the audience tonight. And the children's poetry community, the children's writing community are just so fantastic and supportive. So I did want to make a point of saying thank you to those people. I have ideas all the time. And another kind of fault I have is that I submit to all manner of things. I see call outs. I see the Italian water buffalo marketing board are having a call out for poems about water buffaloes. So I think, I'll do a bit of research into water buffaloes and submit to that. Or, there's a cheddar cheese magazine. I wonder if I could find out about cheddar cheese and write something about. I do that all the time, and I wake up with ideas all the time. So I'm also working on a little series of picture books, which I again with somebody else, and I've got as far. I had ideas for 4. I got as far as the first one. I've actually roughed out the spreads for the first one and written the words for the first one, and there are other things as well. Like I say, this has always been my problem: too many ideas. The good thing was that I eventually managed to get my act together and sit down and concentrate on one idea and get this finished. Because it is, as I say, a blessing and a curse to have so many ideas. I think mostly a blessing. It's just a way of me managing my time and my enthusiasm, so I get things finished. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. You have so much sparking and all the ideas.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's incredible. I wanted to be a writer once, but I literally had no ideas. So
No.
it's like,
Yeah.
So I'm not.
It's a strange one, isn't it? Yeah, but I do like I say all the time, anything and everything. Yeah, I wake up. My notebook here. There was some. I had some call-outs. This is my notebook from a couple of days ago, and I started writing something here, and it gave me an idea for another thing here, which gave me an idea for this and that. So that was an idea for probably 2 children's poems, and an adult poem and an adult flash. But then it's like, well, getting the discipline to knock them into shape, or to think, right, okay, I'm going away, I'm focused on that. And I did actually do that recently. I did actually go away and focus on the picture book that I was talking about. I did actually manage to do that. I just need to do more of that sort of thing.
Well, I'm very grateful that you managed to knuckle down and get through.
I'm very grateful that you managed to read it and enjoy it.
And yeah, I should say, just sort of not to berate Rob, but Rob didn't know how to do a footnote. So Rob's manuscript was it was fine. It was very.
This is a good point, actually. Yes.
But it's, the reason I'm saying this is the stories were so good, but it was the way you read them is obviously you need to glance down. That's how you sort of get you get the thing on the page, you get the humor. So it doesn't work if the footnote's all the way at the end, because you don't get that quick eye movement. So to properly appraise his manuscripts, I think this is when my baby was quite small. So I remember sort of lying down next to her as she slept, and I did it all on my phone. So I I sort of selected the footnotes with my thumb and then deleted it and then insert footnotes, paste, and got it in so that the team could read it.
Yeah, I mean, I can only apologise because I wrote a book about footnotes, and I didn't know how to do footnotes. It was just such a mess when I submitted it, and as well as doing all the regular editing stuff that an editor would have to do, Emma also had to sort out all that mess as well. So yes, I'm forever grateful.
It was completely worth it. I guess that's what I want to say. It was completely worth it.
Good.
And it was also very funny. I found it very funny.
Good.
Having to do it. But yeah, so I think it's time to hear a bit more from the book.
Absolutely, yeah. Just trying to find out what. Remember what I said I was actually going to read at this point. Oh, I know what I was going to read. Yeah, I was going to read two things. One was actually I was just going to actually look at a footnote and then read a whole story for the final story to finish. And it's a footnote. It's this one here. I don't know how visible that is. It's the literal grid there, because that was another nice thing to do, be able to insert something different like that. And I will try to read the grid going across and then read the footnote from it. So it's a grid, and I write, I checked with family and friends about their different names for snow and made a table of the results. There's a fourth column, which is entitled fourth column. It has absolutely nothing in it. This bit here, blank space to draw a lady with some cheese in a pushchair. Okay, that was just a little bit of fun there. And here, people's names, whether they're family or friend, and how they say snow. So Thomas, family, snow. Thomas, friend, snow. Tomasz, gerbil, snow. Thomasina, restaurateur, vanilla sorbet. Tom, friend, snur. Tommy, another gerbil, snow. And then down to the footnotes, Tom, who said snur, that's because he's from Hull, and that's how they maybe say the word snur. I know all about that because he told me in a fern curl. And then the other little footnote there for the gerbil, it turns out that snow is the only word that gerbils can say. Someone once tried to teach a group of gerbils to say snowball. That was 12 years of a person's life wasted, a bit like school. And there's another footnote there with gerbils. Would you believe that the collective noun for a group of gerbils is a gerbil? That's right, a gerbil of gerbils. Isn't language a wonderful thing? Isn't the writer of these footnotes a wonderful thing? Did you know he got a gerbil to help him write them? And now I will read a story called Gloria, page 44, if you're following along. And I will hold it up so we can see the lovely trainer's illustrations that Rena did there. A very frightening thing happened at the seaside. Jan was quite breathless and sat backwards and then forwards in his wheelchair, not knowing what to do with himself. He eventually managed to get the words out. He'd never seen anything like it. He'd never seen anything as big as it. It was so big. I mean, it was so big. It was, how big? I had to get away from it to calm down and get a sense of perspective. It was, oh my word. It was, how big was it, Jan? Tell me. It was as big as a shoe. Gloria screamed and jumped in the air. As big as a shoe? Oh my word, Jan. But that's not all. Surely this couldn't get any worse, couldn't get any more frightening or alarming. That's not all. No. It had these great big long things that were as long as laces. Yes. And that was the last we saw of Gloria. There was a footnote in there about repetition, which I will read now. I appreciate some of you will have been irritated repetition of so and big and so on. So I will endeavour to make sure there is no repeat of the repetition thing. Take it from me, the repetition of the repetitive repeated bits is over. Well and truly over. 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 That was Gloria. And that's there's character in there. Character Jan features in another story as well. Yeah, later on in the book.
Yes, I should say another lovely thing about the book, which I know I actually cut quite a bit of them, was that some of the footnotes have footnotes, and so there's sort of often cascading footnotes. And I know that yes, some of them went, but it's really fun, and it makes the experience of reading the book so sort of lively and dynamic, because you're following along, and yeah, and I guess well, now we know we're following Rob's brain as he darts between the thoughts and the ideas. And yeah, well, thank you so much, Rob. Thank you for treating us with your readings, and for sharing all of your very, very interesting and insightful answers. And thank you to everyone for watching. Lots of lovely comments, lots of nice reactions as well. I've dropped the link to the book, well, the link to buy the book from the Impress website in the chat. But equally, if you have a nice local bookshop, do go in and sort of tell them about this amazing book that's come out. And yeah, buy it for all your friends who have children, and yeah, just your friends who like funny stories. And yeah, so thank you everyone.
Thank you, Emma. Can I just finish as well by saying, hopefully I have managed to thank everybody. There's a list of acknowledgement in the back of the book, so I thank those people. The book is dedicated to my mum, so I thank her because it does say that she gave me all the things she could to help me on my reading and writing journey. So I thank her, and I thank very much. I haven't been able to reply to all the comments in the chat, but thank you ever so much, everyone who came tonight. And Emma is going to send me those comments in the chat, so I very much look forward to seeing those. Enjoy the rest of your Fridays, people.
Yes. Okay. We'll say goodbye now. So bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.